You are in the 7 p.m. Managing Your Money session. Please make sure to put your name in the chat. This session is not eligible for credits. Therefore, there is no need to submit the evaluation for this session. However, I will place the link in the chat to do the survey for YVM and our policy survey. And I will do that momentarily. But without further ado, I would love to introduce Shawn Moody.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Let me see if I can get this camera to work here. Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate you joining our session this evening on a wonderful Sunday. In any event, let's get right into it. So we're going to talk smart money management. I'm going to share some basic tips, strategies that you can take to manage a budget, a basic budget. And having a budget can make a big difference, obviously, in your financial health for both you and your families, as well as what opportunities or lack thereof, right, if it's not managed appropriately. And it also has an impact on your credit as well. So we'll talk all about that. Certainly want it to be a good dialogue. So we'll leave some time at the end for questions. If we do have any pressing questions during the presentation, we'll definitely stop and answer as many of them as we can. So with that, why don't we get the presentation started? So Jennifer, can you, thank you so much. All right, next slide. Perfect. So again, we're going to learn some basic actionable strategies around budgeting. And the goal here is to empower you with real-time information that you can use immediately to positively impact yourself and your families as well. So let's go to the next slide. So the agenda, economic impact of COVID-19. We'll talk about what a basic budget is, why it's important. And we'll also share some tools and resources that you can utilize as well. Next slide. So a little bit about me. So my name is Shawn Moody. I am a credit consultant. I have almost 2 decades. I'm really dating myself here, but almost 2 decades of financial services experience. I'm a former bank executive. I worked for Bank of America as an executive for about a little less than 9 years, and currently the owner of CPM Business Solutions, as well as Moody Bluez Consulting. We basically specialize in helping consumers and small business owners establish, build, maximize, or even repair both personal and business credit. So happy to be here with you this evening again. Currently in Albany, New York. That's my family as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's some quick facts. So we all know that the pandemic definitely delivered the biggest blow to our economy since the Great Depression. We had millions of Americans receiving unemployment. A lot of businesses were shuttered, some permanently, unfortunately. As a matter of fact, a recent study showed over 100,000 small businesses have closed permanently, unfortunately. Also, we know that banks have tightened their lending guidelines pretty much across the board. As an example, Chase, now you have to have a minimum of a 700 credit score to even qualify for a consumer mortgage, whereas before it was in the 600s. And so the bottom line is, as a result of the pandemic, banks have definitely tightened their lending guidelines. In addition to that, more than 70 million Americans had their credit card limits either reduced or shut down, and that was as of July of last year, and that still continues to be the trend. So unfortunately, when we think about managing, whether it's a loan, a personal loan you may have, or even a credit card, you're not allowed to make any mistakes. It's unfortunate. And when I say mistakes, I'm talking about from a credit perspective, right? One late payment can drop your credit score between 90 to 110 points. But in addition to that, if you're late with any of your lenders that you may be working with, whether it's a credit card or, like I said, a loan, an auto loan, again, in this current climate, very unforgiving. So they can either significantly reduce your overall line of credit, or they can even shut down the account as well. And unfortunately, they have the legal right to do so. So again, really speaks to the importance of managing your money the right way. And that's how we're going to get into the budget. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so some more facts. So we talked about some things that impacted the U.S. negatively, but let's look at a couple of things that have changed, I think, for the better as a result of the pandemic. So credit card debt has actually plummeted more than $76 billion since March of last year, and that's actually a record. Also, revolving consumer debt, so I'm talking particularly credit cards, has fell below $1 trillion for the first time in over a decade. The U.S. personal savings rate was nearly double. Again, this is going back to May of last year, and the savings rate continues to be increasing across the United States, right? The real estate market right now is still hot, right? The rates are still low, and it's a seller's market. I work with a lot of real estate professionals, and inventory, generally speaking, is low. So the market is still hot, with rates being where they are. And a little fun fact: a recent survey showed more than 54% of Americans are saying they're cooking at home. So people are finding ways to cut expenses, right? So if they're not going out to the restaurants once a week, twice a week, a couple times a month, they're finding that they're actually saving some money. And it's not so bad to actually cook at home now and then, assuming you can cook. And I'm not even talking about my cooking skills, not good. Next slide, please. So how can you be intentional around saving money? It's easy to say. I think everyone joining this session this evening understands that it's probably a good idea to save your money. But how do you actually go about doing that, right? So let's talk some specifics and how you can be intentional around doing that. Next slide. So having a budget, creating a budget and having good credit, right, go hand in hand. And let's talk about why. Next slide, please. So speaking about a budget, and I think it's good to really get to the foundation of why a budget is important. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of creating a budget, let's really talk about why would you even want a budget in the first place. So I talked about credit. So whether you agree with it or not, credit is your financial reputation, and decisions are being made about you on a daily basis based on that 3-digit number, right? So having good credit, which means you're actually being responsible. So any type of credit that you may have, and there's only 3 different types of credit, right? You've got a mortgage, you have a credit card, and you also have an installment loan, like a student loan or an auto loan as an example. Okay, so having good credit requires you to spend responsibly, and most people that spend responsibly have a budget, right? So you're making your money work for you. So we know the importance of having good credit, right? You're gonna get a much better chance, or have a much better chance of being approved for a loan. You're gonna get lower insurance rates. A lot of people don't realize that your auto premium, your auto insurance premium is loosely based on your credit score as well, not just your driving record. Employment opportunities, having poor credit as a result of not having a good budget or not spending responsibly can actually cost you a job opportunity. If you find yourself having to put down security deposits on your cell phone or for utilities, more than likely there's an opportunity to improve your budget, as well as obviously your credit. Okay. Next slide, please. So the average cost of bad credit by not having a budget is actually $250,000, and I believe that's a general statement, right? But I actually think the number is a little bit higher than that. I actually think it's much higher. But think about that: $250,000 over a lifetime. That's the average cost in having bad credit, not having a budget, having to spend more than somebody that is following a strict regimen of spending wisely and responsibly. Next slide, please. So with your budget, you certainly want to make sure we protect our credit. So you check your credit report regularly. You want to spend within your means, pay your bills on time. If you're working with a lender and you're having any type of financial hardship, it's always better to be proactive and reach out to your lender proactively. Not wait until they're knocking at your door or calling you, looking for you to honor your financial responsibilities. Next slide, please. So what is a budget? Go ahead, hit the button. So it's basically an estimation of your income and your expenses over a specified period of time. Okay, so it's basically a financial plan. And again, you're gonna define what time you're looking to make the budget, whether it's a monthly budget, an annual budget. It could even be a weekly budget, right? But it's normally an annual number. But you can also look at it from a monthly perspective as well, right? So bottom line is, it is in its most basic layman terms, how much money are you bringing in? That's your income, compared to how much money do you have going out? Those are your expenses. And obviously you want to have, after you've figured out how much you've got coming in for the month and how much expenses, that's money going out in the month, ideally you should have some money left over. Now, if you don't have any money left over, or if you're in the negative, you're in the red, then that means we can take a step back. We've got to create a budget, because that's not a sustainable situation, in the sense of that is a recipe for disaster, in the sense of now you're going to find yourself running into debt, and that's where a lot of bad things happen. So the only way you can know exactly where you are and do anything about it, to create a budget, is to tally up all of your expenses, and obviously you know how much is coming in, and we're going to talk about that. And there's a couple different tools you can use to do that. Next slide, please. So I kind of touched on, we said, okay, why is the budget important? And I tied it back to credit. But outside of credit, you also want to make sure it helps you control your spending, right? Because if you know exactly what's coming in and exactly what's going out, then you're much more likely to be in control of how much you're spending. It can definitely keep you on track for any financial goals. Let's say you have a goal of going on vacation by let's say spring of next year, or you're planning to get married and you want to pay for the wedding, or you're saving for children to go to school, whatever financial goals you may have in place. You want to retire, right? It requires a basic plan. Okay, money issues can definitely affect the marriage, so having a budget can definitely help your marriage. Keeps you from being financially overwhelmed, and gets you out of that, what I call the big D word, which is debt, right? If you've got more expenses, more money going out than you have coming in, again, that creates a situation where you're going to be in heavy debt, and that usually causes a lot of bad things to happen. It also keeps you organized. Again, if you know exactly what's coming in and going out, now it gives you the power to make decisions, and you can now figure out, okay, what am I spending on? Am I spending my money on things? How much money am I spending on things that I need versus things that I don't necessarily need, such as like luxury items, as an example. So we'll talk about that. Certainly, you want to prepare for emergencies, right? You should have at least 3 months of savings saved in a bank should there be any type of emergencies, and emergencies do happen, right? Okay, next slide, please. So how do we go about creating a budget? I think we all, again, hopefully we're all on the same page as far as why a budget is important, but how do we do that? Next slide. So there are a lot of online tools. For the purpose of this presentation, I wanted to share a basic sheet. A lot of these are available. You can get them online for free, by the way. But this is a basic monthly budget sheet, right? Worksheet. And you'll see on the left-hand side in the gray, it shows expenses, right? So you've got your household expenses. So examples of household expenses would be your rent or your mortgage, any utilities that you need to, such as gas, electric, cable, satellite, your telephone, your cell phone. All right. So those would be your household expenses. Of course, you want to include, we all have to eat, right? So any groceries as well. Transportation. So you may have a car note. How much are you paying for your auto insurance, right? How much are you paying for gasoline every month? How much is maintenance costing you? Do you have a bumper to bumper warranty, or are you paying, how much is that vehicle costing you every month? So you want to take a look at those expenses, and you'd be surprised as you begin to track these expenses, how much is actually going out, right? And then of course any healthcare, especially if you don't have healthcare. Hopefully you do have healthcare, but if you don't, you want to understand how much that is costing as well for you and your family, right? Then you're going to look at your expenses. So once you figure out how much is going out, now you're going to compare that to how much you have coming in, right? So any take-home pay you have from your employer, assuming you're employed, or whether you're self-employed or you're working for a company, you want to take a look at how much your take-home money is. Any type of part-time work you may have, any other income sources you may have as well. You want to take a look at that, all right? And so we've looked at now your basic income, and we're going to compare that to your expenses. Now, the first group of expenses that I covered on the left-hand side, right? Those are what we call those necessary expenses, right? But what about the unnecessary expenses? Those expenses that you're incurring just for fun. So it's not necessary. I can't talk this evening, that you have it. So example, is it necessary for you to go out to dinner once a week? So if you're spending $60, $80, $100 to go out to dinner once a week, that's $400 a month. So take a step back and say, okay, what could you do with that $400 a month if you say cut down going to dinner once a week to maybe once a month, right? Going to the movies, purchasing music, buying designer clothes. These are all things you want to look at as far as when you're looking to cut expenses, where you can trim some fat so you've got more income. Because the only way to really improve your budget is one of two things. You've got two choices. It's either you're going to make more money, right, which is bringing in more income, or you're going to cut your expenses. Now, if you're able to do both, that's where the magic happens. But the easier to do, generally speaking, is cutting the expenses, right? Are you going to Starbucks every day, or going to Dunkin' Donuts and buying your coffee? How much does that add up to every single week? And then obviously once you figure out the weekly expense, how much is that costing you per month? You'd be surprised. So I would highly recommend that you download a sheet similar to this. Again, you can find this. If you do a simple Google search, you can get just put in monthly budget worksheet. And you can even create one on your own as well, using a basic Excel sheet, but you can do this. Also, there are a ton of apps out there that you can use as well. So for myself, I use Mint, which is a great app, and you can actually electronically input your expenses. You can actually import any financial accounts you may have. So as an example, you can import your bank accounts. You can import any credit cards you may have, any financial relationships that you have, loans, credit cards, your mortgage, banking relationships, checking, savings. You can import all of that, and then you can create a budget that way. So Mint is one, Pocket Guard is another one. Some of the banks as well, especially the major or national banks, offer budgeting tools within their online banking software or online banking apps as well. Next slide, please. All right, so I talked about needs versus wants, right? So a need is something that is a necessity, right? Food, water, shelter. You got to have a roof over your head, whether it's you're paying rent for an apartment or you're paying a mortgage, right? That's a need. Now, a want is something that's unnecessary but desired, right? So again, purchase the CDs. I don't know who's still buying CDs. Probably tough for me to update this this PowerPoint, but I don't know who's buying CDs, but you get the point. Buying, but let's say Apple Music or Spotify, right? Buying designer clothes. We talked about eating out, right? Those are, so it's nice. It's great to get it, to go out every now and then. However, that is not a need, right? That's a want. Buying those luxury clothes, that's a want. Next slide, please. So now that we talked about how important setting a budget is, we talked about comparing your expenses to your income, right? So how do we go about setting a savings goal? Now, a couple of stats for you. So more than half of Americans in the country, as I mentioned earlier, have less than 3 months emergency savings, which again, that's pretty much you. Now you're walking a tightrope, basically, hoping that nothing will go wrong. And by the way, when you hope nothing goes wrong, and I hate to say it, but things can and will go wrong. Whether it's your car, has a flat tire, now you need to replace the tire. That can be a couple $100, or you're a homeowner and the boiler or the furnace breaks down, you have to have it serviced, or you have to have it replaced. There's a number of things that can happen out of the blue, or a pandemic, a once in a century pandemic happens, right? So emergencies happen. So it's better to be prepared than unprepared. 25% of Americans have no emergency fund at all. And this last stat, which actually blew me away, the average consumer spends 85% of their income on items that last less than 3 years. Think about that. So when you think about buying something that's of value, or that will hopefully appreciate in value, 85% of people are spending things on items that have value or that last less than 3 years. So again, definitely an opportunity for people to change their mindset. Next slide, please. So this is an oldie but a goodie. So a lot of bankers, some financial advisors will use this rule. It's not really set in stone, but it's just a general rule of thumb for setting a savings goal. So they call it the 50-30-20 rule. So ideally, you want to spend 50% of your income on needs, 30% on your wants, right? Those are the luxury things, and 20% should be put away for savings. So if you've got $1,000 coming in per month or per week, let's just say, then obviously, $500 of that should go towards your needs, $300 towards wants, and ideally $200 will go towards your savings. All right, and you want to reduce variable spending as much as possible, right? These are expenses that there's not a set number. So as an example, when you go grocery shopping, do you have a set budget on how much you want to spend, or is that number different every time? So are you going to buy $200 worth of groceries this month and then $300 the following month? And in those groceries, is everything essential, or are you buying groceries that may not necessarily be essential, right? So you want to think about that, such as it could be anything from snacks to, again, something that's not necessarily essential for you to have in the home. So again, aim to save a minimum of 3 to 6 months of expenses. So that's the 50-30-20 rule. Next slide, please. And I already gave that example. Next slide, please. So dealing with debt and finances, just in general, I think finance in general, I'm speaking about this personally, and certainly in my profession, I work with a number of people on a daily basis where finance and credit is top of mind, and they're looking to achieve a specific goal. Many of them looking to buy their first home, or purchase a vehicle, or refinance their home. or start a business. But many people have financial goals that they have, and in order to reach those goals, oftentimes it requires you to pivot and make some changes, right, in your spending habits, right? So how do you save, and how do you deal with finance in general? Because it can be very, very stressful and it can be daunting. Next slide. So I'm going to ask you, how do you eat an elephant? Everyone should know the answer to this one. How do you eat an elephant? Next slide. One bite at a time. So, the goal here is not to create the perfect budget overnight, right? I know for myself, speaking for myself personally, I'm a creature of habit, and I have to work at creating and sticking to my budget as well. And then of course I have my wife, and she has her budget, and we figure out when we come in the middle, what do we need, what don't we need, where can we cut? So these are conversations that we have. But at the end of the day, finance in general, and I do this for a living, it can definitely be stressful, and to even have those conversations, whether it's with your loved one, or if you start to think about or family, or you start to think about getting out of especially a difficult financial situation, especially if you find yourself in debt, or you may have your job situation may have changed. It can definitely seem overwhelming. What I would tell everyone today, one nugget I want you to take away from this is one bite at a time, one day at a time. You're not alone. You'd be surprised. Again, I speak to people and clients about this on a daily basis, many clients on a daily basis. And it's rare to have someone have it all figured out day one, right? It's something that you have to work at. Just like if you're working at, you're working out to get fit or to build muscle, you have to work at it, right? So it's a process. So don't beat yourself up. It's one bite at a time. It's one day at a time. Next slide. Next slide, please. So mindset is everything. Mindset is everything. Next slide. So what are some strategies that you can take to tackle debts? What if you find yourself in a lot of debt? And I'm going to talk about specifically credit card debt right now. What are some strategies that you can take to get out of debt? So the first strategy I'm going to share is what's called the Snowball Technique. Okay, and I'm going to give you a couple examples on the next slide. So let's say you've got 3 credit cards, and they're maxed out. So one credit card you owe $1,000, another credit card you owe $5,000, and another credit card you owe $10,000. So it's a total of $16,000 that you owe. Now let's just say the minimum payment for the first card is $25. The minimum payment for the second card is $100, and the minimum payment for the third card is $125. Okay, so we got $1,000, $5,000, and $10,000. The Snowball Technique is basically where you're going to focus on paying your smallest debt first. So if you're making the minimum payments, by the way, if you're making the minimum payments for all those cards, you're going to be paying for north of 20 some odd years to pay that debt off. And if you actually look at your credit card statement, again, we're talking about credit cards, it will actually show you how long it'll take you, because by law, they have the Card Act that came out in 2009, I believe. The Card Act requires lenders to be more forthright around how long it'll take you to pay off your debt, especially if you're only making minimum payments. So if you look at your statement, whether you're getting it in the mail or if you access your statement online, it'll tell you how long it's going to take for you to pay off your debt just by making the minimum payment. And again, typically you're looking at north of 2 decades. Now, the Snowball Technique says what I'm going to do is, instead of making the minimum payments on all 3 cards, I'm going to double up or even triple as much as I can, put as much money as I can on the smallest debt. So the smallest debt is $1,000. So even if my minimum payment is $15, right? If I just start to make a payment of $30, or let's say $50, assuming that's in my budget, I'm gonna obviously pay off that $1,000 credit a lot sooner than 20 some odd years. So let's go to the next slide. We'll make this make a little bit more sense. All right. So in this example, I know I gave an example of 1, 5, and 10. In this example, there's 2 credit cards, one Chase and one Capital One. The Chase card's at $9,700. The Capital One's at $4,100 for a total of $13,800. So if this person made the minimum payments for those 2 cards, it would take them 24 years to pay that debt off. Now, making an extra $75 a month payment, just an extra $75 a month, this same person would be debt-free in 6 years. And if they made $100 payments, they'd be completely debt-free in 5 years. And I'm talking about the full $13,800. So the way the snowball technique works is you really focus on the account with the smallest debt first, and you throw all as much resources, as much cash at that as possible, and then you work your way up to the next card, right? So in the example I gave you, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, you would double up your payments on the $1,000 card first, get that paid off, then you focus on the $5,000 card. Same technique applies, and then from there, once that's paid off, now you focus a majority of all your cash, you throw it at the $10,000 card. So that's called a snowball technique, right? Because as you think about a snowball rolling down a hill, as it rolls down, it gets bigger, right? So that's one technique. Next slide. The other technique is the Avalanche technique. So this is a little bit different. And by the way, financial pundits will debate on which technique is better. I think it's basically just preference. I know for me, I prefer. Well, actually, you know what? It depends. It depends, and I'll tell you why. So the Avalanche technique, the focus there is paying your highest interest debt first, and then working your way down. So in the example where I said, okay, you had a $1,000 card, a $5,000 card, and a $10,000 card. If the $1,000 card has the highest interest rate, let's say I'm paying 20% interest on the $1,000 card, and I'm paying 15% on the $5,000, and let's just say 10% on the $10,000 card. With the Avalanche technique, I'm going to focus on the card that has the highest interest rate, which in that example would be the $1,000 card. So I'm going to pour all my money, as much resources as I can on the $1,000 card that has the highest interest rate. And then once I've tackled that card, I've paid it off, then I'm going to work my way down. Now I'm going to work my way to the second highest interest rate, if that makes any sense. Okay, pay that card down, then I work my way down to the third highest interest rate, which is a $10,000 card. So again, little change in technique, but just as effective as a snowball technique. Okay. And again, here's the beauty of this. This can seem very daunting. There are a number of free, and the key word here is free, online tools that whether you're using the snowball technique or the Avalanche technique, it'll automatically calculate. So there are free tools out there, electronic, that'll automatically calculate. So it'll tell you exactly. You can put in how much the debt is, what the interest rate is, what your balances are, and how much money you want to pay, and it'll actually calculate how much you'll save and how long it'll take you to pay off that debt. And what's cool about these techniques is that you can celebrate small victories, right? Because as you start to eliminate, remember we talked about how do you want to take it one day at a time, right? How do you eat the whale? One bite at a time, same thing. You want to celebrate small victories. So as you pay off each card one by one, in this example, that's a small victory. Next slide, please. Other debt strategies that are out there. So most banks usually have free financial planning services. So, if you're with a financial institution, whether it's a bank or a credit union, make them earn your business, right? Make them earn your relationship, especially in the climate that we're in right now. It's not enough for them to simply just, process cashing a check or taking a deposit slip. They should have your best interests at heart, meaning they should help you with a plan to achieve whatever financial goals you may have. So most banks do have planning services or financial tools, including the online banking, where they have tools to help you better manage your finances. Debt settlement or counseling services. So debt settlement is actually an alternative to bankruptcy, right? So debt settlement. So now debt settlement, the only time I recommend to even consider, and the key word here is consider debt settlement, is if you're way in over your head, and obviously the expenses far outweigh the income coming in, and you're considering bankruptcy. So debt settlement is an alternative to bankruptcy, where a professional will go in and they'll actually negotiate with the lenders. What will happen is the account will get closed. It'll be what's called charged off. So it does tremendous damage to your credit. Your credit will probably be in the 500s. However, it gives you however, in doing so, you have the opportunity to pay a reduced principal balance. So let's say you're $20,000 in debt. Working with a debt settlement professional, they may get that reduced, including their fees, to maybe say $12,000. So now you're paying $12,000 over 3 years versus paying $20,000 forever, right? Especially if you're only making the minimum payments. So that's an option. There are nonprofits out there. Example is NewYorkDebtRelief.org, where you can get advice for free. You can certainly speak with a financial advisor, a banker, and certainly a credit specialist such as myself. Next slide, please. So what are some basic? Let's bring it home, and then we'll open it up for questions. So what are some basic money management tips? So one, check your credit report regularly. Right, this is your financial reputation. You have to know where you are to be able to understand where you're going or where you want to go, and to be able to achieve your goals. And while we're talking about a budget, this has a direct impact and is related. There is a correlation between having a good budget, and having good credit. So you can check your credit report regularly for free at either annualcreditreport.com. Also, Experian.com has a free option where you can get your Experian report as well as your FICO 8 score, and that's actually refreshed on a monthly basis. It doesn't cost you a dime. You don't need to provide a debit card or a credit card. You want to assess your debts. Again, the way to assess your debts is to either use one of those budgeting apps that I told you about, like Mint, like I use, or go, utilize a basic budgeting sheet, right, which you can find online as well. And you want to list all your debts out there, every single debt, and all your expenses, and then also obviously list your income. You want to create that budget, right? You want to include your cost of living. You also want to build in a savings plan as well. And we talked about ideally saving at least 20% of your income. And by the way, you can start small. 5%. 5% is better than 0%, right? 10% is better than 0%. So if you're intentional about it, and you know exactly what's coming in and what's going out, it's easier to create that budget. I highly recommend it, and it's definitely a good practice to enlist an accountability partner. So when you're feeling triggered, that can happen in a number of different ways, right? And you hear that voice in your head, and you feel like you're going into a place where you don't want to be, especially as it relates to your finances. Enlist an accountability partner, and you know that is whether it's a loved one, a friend that you can trust, and the key word here is trust, right? But the accountability partner can definitely make a difference. And then, like I said, if there's someone that you trust, and that might be that same accountability partner, you may enlist them, assuming that they are responsible, right? And it's someone you trust. You can enlist them to help you manage your money. Next slide, please. You want to set up a bank account. So you don't want to have cash lying around. Not only is that a safety concern, but also a basic bank account is going to help you understand exactly how much money you have to work with. And again, you couple that with the budgeting tools that many financial institutions have right now. That's a recipe for success. If you find yourself being tempted to draw money out, then I suggest not actually ordering a debit card. You don't have to get a debit card, right? Set up a direct deposit. Another way to ensure that the money that you're earning is where it needs to be, right? So you're not having that temptation of doing multiple withdrawals. Set up a savings account. You can even set up an automatic transfer where a certain percentage of money or a certain dollar amount, and again, you can start small. It doesn't have to be a ton of money. It could be $5, $10, $20, whatever it is. $20 a month. Guess what? That's $240 you've saved for the year. That can make a difference, right? We talked about that tire blowing out. That could be the money you use for an emergency to replace your tires so that you can have your vehicle on the road to get to work. So don't underestimate starting small. And of course, you want to be realistic. Again, you don't want to try to boil the ocean. They said Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So start small. Every little bit counts. Next slide. And just another wrap up of the resources. So I mentioned the Mint and Pocket Guard. NerdWallet. NerdWallet is a site that I use personally, and I send all my clients there. It's a great app. They actually have a so we talked about the Snowball and the Avalanche techniques. They actually have a wonderful online tool that you can utilize both those techniques. Nerdwallet.com. Talked about the bank apps. We talked about the importance of building a relationship with your banker. There are a ton of Facebook support groups out there that you can tap into. We talked about the importance of having an accountability partner. Certainly, you can also tap your recovery sponsor, and then, of course, any trusted friends or loved ones. Next slide. And I've got 7:43, and let's open it up for questions. I can't see myself, so hopefully. Oh, now I see myself.
Sorry for the delay.
That's all right.
So we have a couple of questions in our Q&A.
Okay.
And I'll start with the first one. What would you call good credit?
Great question. So good credit is generally a 720 or better. So fair is between a 680 to 720. But if you have a 720, so between 680 and 700 is considered fair. If you have a 720, that's considered good. All right. The credit score goes from 300 to 850. Even though it goes to 850, you don't have to get an 850. If you actually get to a 760, you're going to get the best rates, generally speaking, across the board. It's going to cost you the least amount of money to finance what you want, whether it's buying a car, buying a house. That's the number, 760. Great question.
All right. The next question, it's a two-part. One is, are you available for private consultation or what or who would you recommend to consult to become financially fit?
Yes, I am available for a consultation. As far as financially fit, I think first of all, I'm happy to have the conversation, so maybe we can figure out who that person is or what that resource looks like. But I do think, start again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a banking relationship, they have a fiduciary responsibility to help you reach your goals. And if they're not, I would submit you should reconsider your banking relationship, right? A financial advisor. There are a number of different resources out there you can tap into. But yes, I'm happy to have a consult. Initial consult is free.
able, can you put your email in the session chat?
Sure. Let me see if I can figure out this.
It's on the right hand
I'm gonna try
side
to
of
be
the
technically
screen.
inclined here. I'm gonna work on this. You guys don't make fun of me.
There is no judgment, as we're all learning this together.
Okay. Let's see here. Did that come up?
Perfect. All right, I will get to the next question. How would you recommend dealing with medical bills that claim to be uncovered expenses?
Medical bills that claim to be uncovered expenses. So these medical bills, have they gone to collections or not?
Let me see.
So what I would say is always do your due diligence with medical bills. So first of all, 1 in 5 people have a medical collection on the report have no idea. 1 in 5 in the country, right? And so you have your rights under HIPAA and a number of different laws. So what I would say is check with the medical provider first. They should be able to give you specifics around why that medical bill is why they're looking to collect on that specific bill, right? So check with the medical provider first. If you have insurance, then check with them as well, right? Any your whatever insurance coverage you may have, check with them, right? And this is all under the assumption, well, you would do this anyway. Now, if it's gone to collections, you definitely want to do what I just told you. But also, you have the right to request. I'm not going to say demand, although demand sounds harsh, but you have the right to request proof of that debt. So if it's gone to collections, it's gone to a third-party debt collector or junk buyer, you have the right to ask them to send you the proof in writing. And you have rights under what's called the FDCPA, which stands for Fair Debt Collection Practices. Excuse me, FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which is basically a law that governs collection companies and the language they use in letters and or phone calls. And if they're found to be in violation, they're subject to heavy fines. So if anyone on this webinar this evening has gotten a collection letter or a call, I have an amazing FDCPA attorney that will work for you for free. So reach out.
Perfect. So we've got another question. If you have several credit cards with a 0 balance, is it better for your credit score to get rid of them if you don't use them, as long as you keep the one that has the longest credit history?
Another good question. So the general rule of thumb is you don't close all credit cards, right? But I don't deal in a system of absolutes, right? There's always an exception. So what I would say is you're absolutely right. So 15% of your score is based on the age of your credit, right? So 15%, so which is why you never want to close an old credit card. Now, the average age of your accounts, if your average age is, let's say, 8 years, 10 years, which is fantastic, then closing a credit card that you opened last year is not going to do much damage. But if you're going to close a credit card that you've had 15 years, you may lose some points. Secondly, what I would say is, and I had to learn this myself too. I'm not going to tell you how many credit cards I have because I own a couple businesses, but I don't want to get in trouble. However, here's what I'll say. It's not uncommon for lenders to close credit cards that go an extended period of time with no activity, right? They see it as a risk. Again, remember I mentioned earlier in the call, banks are tightening lending guidelines. So if you have a credit card and you want to keep it just to have it, and I'm of the opinion, especially if it's an older card, keep it. Be intentional and use it. And I know I'm being recorded here, so I'm going to say this with some context. Shawn Moody's not saying to spend money just for the sake of spending money. However, even if you can use it once or twice a year and use it on a necessary expense, so you've got to pay for your cell phone, you've got to pay for your cable or your wireless, right? use it on that, and then pay it off. This way you're showing activity, because oftentimes, especially in the current economic climate, lenders are going ahead and proactively closing cards with no activity. So just be wary of that. So there's no right or wrong answer. I don't know how many, I know you said you've got several credit cards, but general rule of thumb, the older cards, keep those active. And again, try to make at least 1 or 2 purchases. I'm not saying go out and just buy stuff for the sake of buying stuff. That's not what we're saying here. But be spending on the needs. Be specific, be strategic to spending on something that you need. Very low balance, and then pay it off. If that makes any sense. Good question.
That was helpful for me as well. I've got a really good question here. At what age would you begin teaching your children about credit, and what advice would you give to help them understand credit and spending?
Boy, you guys, I'm telling you. So my son is 6, and I really haven't. I've got 2 older stepdaughters as well. We taught them in there probably around 13-ish, 14-ish. So I think you can't start too early. And I got to really practice what I preach, right? Because my son is 6. I haven't talked to him about credit yet. However, having said that, here's the thing. The 5 basic rules of how credit works, the 5 basic rules of the FICO score, which is used by 90% of the banks, have not changed. It hasn't changed. 30% of your score, you got to pay bills on time. We know that. That's 35%. 30% of your score, keep your balances low. 15% of your score, don't close, is based on the age of your account. 10% of your score, don't apply for credit unless you need it. That's based on inquiries. The last 10% is based on types of accounts: mortgage, credit card, installment loan, like an auto loan. These rules haven't changed. So to answer your question, I definitely think, going into high school, no later than that. But I don't think you can be too early. Put it that way. And the other piece of it too is, and again, you got to be careful. I know some of my clients, they'll add their children to their credit card so they can have them piggyback as an authorized user, where they can start to build credit ahead of time. So if I wanted to, I could add my 6-year-old son as an authorized user, which is great, because by the time he's 18, he'll have history that he'll show a 12-year history, right? Which is fantastic. However, the caveat is, let's say I fall upon hard times and I'm late on a payment. Now I've just hurt my son's credit. He's not even 7 yet. So you've got to be. There's always the yin and the yang. There's the pros and the cons. But great question.
We have 2 more questions. Would a bank like Chase provide free financial planning for me in spite of my checking and savings account or amount? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know Chase's. I think they just did a big promotion with Kevin Hart with just financial literacy and stuff. I would go to call your local branch and ask. I don't know the answer to that. So bottom line is I don't know the answer. However, they should be able to provide you with basic financial planning. Yes. Now there are certain financial departments or financial advisors where you have to have a certain amount of income or assets. But for basic financial planning, that should come with you. That should come with your account. And if that doesn't, and if they can't provide that, which I gotta believe they can, you should consider another lender. And even some of the smaller credit unions, the smaller banks, they're a little more consumer friendly. I've worked for the big banks, right? Bank of America is one of the biggest banks. And like I said, there's pros and cons of working with big lenders, but then there's also some benefits of working with a smaller regional bank or even a credit union.
I think this is our last question. Oop, nope, I lied. What do you think about using credit cards with a high limit and paying your bills and paying the card off monthly to help grow your credit score?
You can do that. As a matter of fact, my recommendation would be, so the sweet spot. I love these credit questions. I love that. But in any event, there's nothing wrong with being a transactor. As a matter of fact, I would recommend being a transactor. A transactor is someone that pays their entire balance off every single month. So if you're going to pay your entire balance off every month, that means you have to stay within your budget, right? So if you can't spend on your credit card more than what you're bringing home for the month. Or now you're going to be a revolver. A revolver is someone that continues to carry a balance. And if the balance continues to creep up like this, right, because you're only making the minimum payment, what happens to your credit score? It goes down. So I would recommend, so yes, you can use the card to build your credit history. However, be a transactor, not a revolver. Pay it off in full. If you have to keep the balance less than 10% of the limit. And again, ideally spending on needs, not wants. There are cards for kids.
You saw that one? Perfect.
Yes, there are cards, and I don't know. There's a couple of them. They're on the act. So whether you're on Google Play or iPhone, the Apple Store, store, whatever. There's a number of cards out there. I'll see if I can. I'll send it to you guys. There's one or two out there. I can't think of them right now, but yes, there are a couple out there that you can use for the kids to help them practice basic budgeting.
All right. I think that is all of our questions for this evening. Excellent questions. As an outsider, I think they were excellent questions. But if you have any last minute questions, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, Shawn, thank you so much for all of your time and insight. And we will let you go a couple minutes early tonight.
Ooh, I get it. No. Thank you. Thanks again. I hope that everyone took something of value from the session. And like I said, you can always reach out. I'm happy to chat with you. No strings attached. I do a free consult anyway, initially. So with that, I want to thank everyone for your time and wish everyone well.